activist, and she just has a wealth of information. So the relationship of this presentation to the class is that, as you know, not only have we been studying women in social movements, but we've been trying to incorporate a little bit of personal development into the course as well. And what Tayla has written about is something that's definitely important to all of our personal development, because it has to do with money, it has to do with stability, and it has to do with home ownership. And she's going to tell you more about it. But I just wanted to start with that introduction. And Tayla, I respect you and admire all the work that you've done. And I'm so grateful to be able to call you a sister friend. And I'm so grateful for this time with you this morning. So students, please give Tayla an applause or a thumbs up or any kind of welcome. And thank you again, everyone, for being here.
Thank you so much for having me. For those who do not know, I am Tayla Andre. Waking Up with Tayla Andre has absolutely nothing to do with the time of day we link up, but about waking up your third eye with unorthodox conversations leading to universal consciousness. I air live on Spark FM online Monday through Friday from 11 a.m. to 1 p.m. And the premise of the show is unorthodox conversations leading to universal consciousness, and that is because we are whole people. So from Motivational Monday to Freaky Friday, each one of us is a whole person that has multiple layers to us. And so we're not box checkers, even though society will have us believe that we are. We are not just the identity on paper. And so we engage in conversations that are not typical to society and kind of unpack them every day. And I joke, but I'm so serious that the show is like therapy for me. So I'm not talking to the audience, but I'm really talking to myself in the mirror and teaching myself next steps and what we need to do as humans to just progress, period. And so I am honored today. Thank you so much, Dr. Amina Pilgrim, for having me. I absolutely love your soul. I love your spirit, and I appreciate you having me here today. Finally Home, the step-by-step guide for people preparing for first-time home ownership, was a book that I wrote honestly during COVID. So this was like a planned thing that I was supposed to be doing for the last few years, and COVID hit, and it was just like, well, you have nowhere else to go, so get it done. I started out as a radio personality just trying to understand what gentrification is. I live in Roxbury, which is, home of our Black history here in Boston. And I just didn't understand how the street that was so dangerous for me as a child to even go outside and sit on the porch was now all of a sudden the street where people were walking their dogs at 5 a.m. And I was like, what's really going on and how does this happen? I interviewed anyone and everyone from the mayor to the police commissioner to the governor, and always asked the same question, like, what's going on with housing development in Boston and why is it so unaffordable? And all of these other questions that we'll unpack throughout our class together. And so nobody had the answer for me. Nobody was giving me the answer that sufficed my soul's question. And so I went digging a little bit more, fell down that rabbit hole into my real estate license. And from there, started learning anything and everything there was about the history of Black people in America in regards to housing. And that's when my eyes really opened to the problems that persist. And, I can't change the system. I wish I could. I would love to be able to. But the truth of the matter is, I am very limited in the scope of which I can do. So instead of focusing on the things that I had no control over, what is it that I do have control over, and how can I help? And for me, education has always been important. And so I will cut to like the long intro, but I will start jumping in. What I would like to do is I would like to go through the history of what I learned and I'm still learning. Let me be clear. I am still learning because I am in the process of reading The Color of Law, which really breaks down the history of discrimination in the United States when it comes to Black people in home ownership. And so it's a really simple book. It's a really easy read. If you have a third grade education, this book is understandable for you. And that was important to me because when you understand the demographics and the history, there are a lot of Black people and a lot of lower income families, not even just Black, Latinos, which some don't consider themselves Black, but that's not the class for this today, as well as like Asian Americans, anyone who, Irish Americans, anyone who's not the typical white family had difficulties becoming a homeowner and have difficulties in the education system. And so without any further ado, the acknowledgement, I would like to read the acknowledgement because I feel like it really hits home to why this book is important. I want to give a huge shout out to George Bush and all political and influential affluent assholes that implemented and currently support in the form of complacent silence, a federal policy that encourages municipal education systems to leave children behind. With outdated teaching methods, deceitful curriculums, useless testing, over-disciplining, and ignoring talent, and the most importantly, failing to prepare the youth for the real world. This book exists because real education does not take place in our institutions. This book is dedicated to the 55-year-old learning how to manage their credit, or to the millennium that is breaking generational habits and first-time homeowners that still don't understand the process of buying a home. The history hurts, and I hope you guys are ready for this. The history of discriminatory truth. History seldom speaks of the victim's struggles, resilience, or triumphs, but boasts about his accomplishments, even when victory was the sum of another's efforts. The colonizer that would proudly wear his or her red MAGA hat often uses the phrase, pull yourself up by the bootstraps, while rarely ever knowing the truth behind how people of color couldn't even buy the boots or the straps to pull up. There are thousands of books on housing discrimination, the laws that created systematic oppressive practices, and still in 2020, urban communities are suffering from lack of proper education, misguided information, and blatant lies. 1789, private property rights. The United States government rules that Blacks are slaves and are property, not citizens, and have no rights at all. 1855, Massachusetts passed its Married Women's Property Act on May 5th, allowing white married women the ability to buy, sell, and manage the real property and personal property that they owned. Dred Scott as a fugitive slave suing for his freedom, but because Scott was property and not a citizen, he had no right to sue. Again, that was 1857. In 1865, Congress chartered the Freedmen Saving and Trust Company, a banking institution for those released from slavery. No banking services were afforded to Blacks, even though they were land and business owners. 1866, the 14th Amendment declared all persons born in the United States are citizens and have the same rights to real property as whites. 1876, the government can take your land. This is known as eminent domain. The government's duty to public is more critical than your personal inconvenience. 1872, the Homestead Act amended to include Blacks. 1877, Reconstruction ends and Jim Crow begins. 1916, Buchanan versus Worley. The court found it unconstitutional for Louisville, Kentucky ordinance that prohibited Blacks from purchasing a property in white majority-owned neighborhoods. Though this case was passed and that Blacks had the legal right, the United States government still not only allowed but engaged in racial discrimination practices towards Blacks. In 1917, the Supreme Court ruled zoning based on race was unconstitutional. Owners began adding covenants or restrictions to their deeds. This is 1917, and to this day, there are still deeds located in Brookline, Massachusetts that still have racial covenants, and those racial covenants are almost impossible to have removed unless you financially pay an attorney and fight it tooth and nail. But in 2020, these racial covenants still exist on many deeds that don't necessarily even need racial covenants, because the mentalities of the owners, they would never sell to a Black person regardless of how much they were willing to pay for the house anyways. That's not in the book. That was just a sidebar.
Thank you. That's over 100 years.
Oh, no, we're not done, baby.
I know. And I just wanted to remind students that if they want to ask questions or make comments in the chat, to go ahead, and I'll be monitoring that for Tayla. So go ahead and use the chat as well. Thanks, Tayla. Sorry to interrupt.
No worries. That's true. Over 100 years. For example, as far as racial covenants or restrictions to deeds are concerned, this is what the language is on the deeds. No part of said lot shall be accompanied by any person of Negroid race or blood, except in the capacity of a servant. Property shall never be sold, rented, or otherwise disposed of to any persons or person having any percentage of Negro blood. 1924, National Association of Real Estate prohibits integration. So if you ever see real estate agents that have the R next to their name, they're a realtor. The Realtors Association, in their bylaws, we're just like, if you as a realtor engage in race integration, your license can be taken away. And as a realtor, I personally will never become I will never pay a company for the R next to my name that engaged in racial discrimination practices. And the only reason why they changed their bylaws and changed their practices is because the United States government forced them to, and not because they wanted to or thought it was wrong in what they were doing. A realtor, and this was the language in their bylaws, a realtor should never be instrumental in introducing into a neighborhood a character of property or occupancy, members of any race or nationality, or any individual whose presence will be detrimental to the property values in that neighborhood. In 1933, Homeowners Loan Corporation, created by President Franklin D. Roosevelt, part of the New Deal. 1934, Federal Housing Administration was established. Also in 1934, the U.S. government creates redlining. Let me be clear. The United States government created redlining on the federal level. I just need it to be known that while we have a government that claims to be all of these amazing things, these are practices that they engaged in less than 100 years ago. In 1934, the U.S. government created redlining through the National Housing Act of 1934, allowing homeowners, loan corporations to create residential security maps to outline high-risk areas that were occupied by Blacks. This is predominantly the reason why Blacks live in isolated urban areas of the city today. And if you take a look at some of the maps that we have recently that the Boston Globe has put together, that the city of Boston has put together, of demographically where people live, you can still see the effects of redlining today, even though 90 years later. In 1936, the FHA promotes racial segregation. FHA. So for those who do not know, FHA is, if you don't have 20% to put down on a house, you typically get an FHA loan. If you have the 20%, that's a conventional loan. It's not backed by the United States government, and FHA is backed by the United States government on a federal level. And the FHA, this quasi-governmental agency, promoted racial segregation in 1936, prohibiting the occupation of properties except by the race for which they are intended. Inharmonious racial groups and incompatible racial elements will devalue a neighborhood. 1944, the GI Bill, or the Servicemen's Readjustment Act, afforded 63,000 white veteran home ownership opportunities, while non-whites used less than 1,000. Though there were over hundreds of thousands of GI Bills that were used, it was afforded to, as far as white veterans are concerned, 63,000 of them utilized this bill in 1944, while less than 100 Blacks were able to utilize it. 1947, so when this book was written, I did not read The Color of Law. Since then, reading The Color of Law, one of the things that I learned was the reason why some of these servicemen were able, the less than 100 were able to obtain a home using the GI Bill was either one, because they had a white man purchase on their behalf. Two, because they were married to or had relationship with a white person who intervened, not purchasing, but like was able to like, oh, make this happen for my friend type situation. Or three, they lied on their application. And when I am in the middle of a chapter now learning is that many of those that purchased under the false guise of being a white person, the federal government rescinded. They had to immediately remove themselves from the home, and they didn't get any money back. They didn't get deposit back. They didn't get any money for the sale. It was, you purchased this illegally. You lost any and all rights and all benefits. 1947, blockbusting real estate agents deceiving whites into white flight. Blacks are moving in. It's time to move. White real estate agents to scare whites out of neighborhoods. Like if one Black person moved in, it was like, listen, we just converted all together. We got to get the white people to move out. How do we do that? They would pay someone to, they paid Black women to push baby carriages in the neighborhood that didn't even live there. They paid Black men to have fights in the middle of the streets. They also paid Black people to stage break-ins so that they really weren't stealing anything. It was just like break the glass, unlock the door, mess up the house a little bit so people would be scared to leave. In 1948, the Supreme Court ruled against racially restrictive covenants, deeds that prohibited Blacks from purchasing the property. So in 1948, this is when the federal government said you can no longer have deed restrictions that read these things. It didn't rescind any of the previous deed restriction covenants that existed. In 1968, Martin Luther King Jr. was assassinated. The Kerner Commission. Our nation is moving towards two societies, one Black, one white, separate and unequal. And also in 1968, President Lyndon Johnson signed the Civil Rights Act of 1968. Amendments were made to the 1964 Act to include housing, and also known as the Fair Housing Act, that prohibits discrimination concerning the sale, rental, and financing of housing based on race, religion, and national origin. It was later amended to include disabilities and family status. 1968, Jones versus Meyer Supreme Court decision bars all racially discriminative practices, private as well as public, regarding the sale, property, or rent, and the statute thus instructed is true, exercising the Congress power to enforce the 13th Amendment. 1973, Donald Trump and his daddy was sued for racial discrimination. 1974, the Fair Housing Act is amended to include sex. 1974, the Equal Credit Opportunity Act, creditors cannot be discriminatory versus a person based on race. 1977, the Community Reinvestment Act, or Housing and Community Development Act of 1977, transparency of loan practices. The reason why this was important, and I'd like to give some background on that, is because once upon a time, during this time in the 1960s, 1950s, what they were doing was, the government said that you can now buy where we don't want you to buy. But what we're going to do as loan originators, as loan officers, is you're going to pay anywhere between 5 to 25% more than white people. So if you want to live in this neighborhood, you're going to have to pay a premium simply because you're Black. In 1980, Bill Dedman investigated that banks would lend to lower income whites, but not to middle or higher income Blacks. In 1988, the Fair Housing Alliance was founded. In 1988, the Fair Housing Act amended to include family status and disabilities. In 2020, JP Morgan, Chase, Bank of America, Wells Fargo, Wachovia, within the last 10 years, we're all instructed to pay hundreds of millions of dollars towards discrimination cases. Although the timeline began when indigenous Blacks were considered real property, the discrimination towards melanated people still persists today. There was recently a story in the news of a biracial couple, Black wife, white husband, who were in the process of getting an appraisal so they could refinance and pay down their loan. When the first go round, so this was in Florida, the properties around the area sold for $350,000. They got a appraisal back at $262,000. They said, this is not right. Something is wrong. So the wife said that she, for a second, forgot she was living in America and forgot the climate that she was living in. She went ahead and took down all remnants of her and her Black son out of the home. She left her white husband in the house to meet the appraiser. That second appraisal came back 40% higher at $368,000, which is $100,000 more than the first appraisal. This is in 2020. This just happened. It's still in the news. My question to you all is, was any of this curriculum taught to you? Did you know any of this information that I just read?
So Carla in the chat saying, wow, I can't even be surprised. Also, just as a time check, Tayla, there's about 20 minutes left for this particular class.
Okay.
So everyone in the chat saying no, not at all, wow, never learned any of that.
And this is our history. This is the United States government engaging in unethical practices. And when you take a look at the systems today, $100,000 to $1 billion corporation, like, they make billions of dollars in a year, net, not gross. 100 million is a slap on the wrist. It's like 1% of their annual income. It's like, oh, I messed up. Don't do it again. And I can't tell you how many times these banks have had to pay out $100 million. It's like every 5 years, we did a study, we found you discriminated. Oh, let's just pay this fine, with no other restitution given to those that could have been homeowners 10 years ago. And so the reason why I think this is so important is because once we understand our history, we can do what's needed to make sure that we don't repeat it. I think stuff like this needs to be taught in school. It currently isn't. It's not part of the curriculum when it comes to middle school, high school. I have, my children are 17 and 15. I've been through the middle school curriculum. I'm in the high school curriculum. They learn none of this. Also in the book, out of 70 pages, there's over 22 pages of just credit. And so no, people don't understand credit. Again, this is something that I believe that we should be teaching in school. Did you know that your FICO score is the score that people actually look at, not the score that you look at when you look at your Credit Karma, not the score that you look at when you're on your Credit Wise, though that is not a proper reflection of what your credit score is. Did you know that you can get foreclosures, bankruptcies, inquiries, late payments, all off your credit? There is no legal statute that says that creditors have to report to a credit agency in order to snitch on you for not paying your bills on time. It's even businesses have to pay to report. So they come out of pocket to pay to say Tayla didn't pay her student loans this month. And all of that is then played into the role of whether or not you can buy a house, you can rent an apartment. And even to the effect today, some people won't even hire you if your credit's messed up. And once upon a time, it was only if you're in like finances. So if you're trying to be a banker, if you're trying to do investments, then we would look at your finances and see if you can't manage your own finances, we're not going to put you in a position to manage somebody else's finances. But today in 2020, we're seeing people who aren't even dealing with money at all being judged on their credit score and not given the opportunity to have certain employments. And so as far as credit is concerned, some of the things that there's a lot, and I think we only have 15 minutes. And so what I would like to do is to ask you, what questions do you have about credit so I can answer those directly instead of giving you a whole spew on credit.
Thank you. We've got so many positive comments in the chat. You're probably able to see it. Just everyone is learning a lot. So thank you so much for writing this book and for being here. And I hope everyone is truly enjoying this presentation. Like I said, this course being about women in social movements, it's great that we have someone on the ground locally who is doing the work. So ask any questions you want to ask.
You guys are students, so I know you got some student loans. What questions do you have about your student loans? Since there are no questions as of yet, somebody said, I remember it was in real estate that Trump made his fortune. It was his daddy who first made his fortune in real estate, and then Donald Trump followed behind his father. 80% of millionaires became millionaires because of real estate. Real estate is the easiest way that you can accrue a large income, and it's so easy and it's so amazing. But since we do not teach this to students, this isn't a curriculum. You have to pay for this knowledge. You have to seek out this knowledge and be put yourself in the right circles, when this should be the stuff that you're learning in high school, so you can be an engaging, active, financial, stable American after school, or if you choose not to go to school.
Got two questions. Someone said, what type of credit gets you the best rates for a mortgage payment, 10 to 20% down?
So yes, Ingrid, you can buy a house even if you have student loans. For people who have higher student loans, like doctors and attorneys and some like aerospace or engineering, there are different loans for people with really, really high student loans. And that's because they understand that you could not be in this profession without this accruing this mass amount of student loans. And so that's like certain, you guys know bodegas, right? So different bodegas have different products. And because different bodegas have different products, different loan offices or brokerages have different programs. And so you'd have to seek out a loan officer that tailors to a higher student loan payment in order to get you what's right. Because usually what happens is they take a look at your credit, they take a look at your income, and they take a look at your savings. And they take a look at your debt to income ratio. So if your debt to income ratio, which means if you have a credit card for $100 and you've used $95, you're at a 95% credit utilization. But if you have a $100 credit card and you only use $10, you have a 10% credit utilization. You want your credit utilization to be 30% 70% or lower. And when you have high student loans, your credit utilization is through the roof, because even if they're in deferment, they still look at 1% of what it. So let's say, for instance, you have $70,000 in student loans, but you make $100,000 a year. Your $100,000 a year is not looked at as strong, because they're taking your deferment of $70,000, and that's $700 a month that you could be maybe paying. So that's $700 that is taken away from your possible mortgage. I hope I explained that correctly. If not, if you have any questions, just let me know. As far as what type of credit gets you the best rates, the best credit score is 750 or above. That will get you the lowest rate possible. But as far as like 10 to 20% down, you do not have to put 10 to 20% down if you don't want to. You can do an FHA program, which only allow 3% or 3.5%, depending on the brokerage that you work with or the program that you use. And there's also programs like NACA. They are extremely tedious. They are a pain in the ass, but you put $0 down, like zero, absolutely zero. You put nothing down. You come out of pocket, nothing, $0. But it is time consuming, and because they have such a high turnover rate, you could possibly have like 4 different agents helping you during your process. What's the best way to boost your credit? So the best way to boost your credit is to make sure that you pay everything on time. That is the largest contributor to your credit. So for instance, I love my credit score. So right now I have a 780 credit score, and I fought tooth and nail to get a 780 credit score. It is not easy. Everybody who wants a 850, you have to be making like $250,000 a year, have damn near a black card. Like a 850 is difficult to obtain. I have friends that have, real estate, $100,000 in credit cards, and still at like 815. And so I've never met anybody with perfect credit, but anything above. Okay, Anari's friend Anari has somebody who has perfect credit, but he's a different breed. That's a different story. I have never met a working adult that has a perfect credit score, even with homeownership and multiple credit cards. But the best way to boost it is to go ahead and continuously pay your credit on time. Anything that you owe, just pay it on time, even if you pay minimum. Though minimum really hurts you in the end, because you end up paying double, triple of what you're spending simply on interest, especially if you have a 28% interest rate, which is typical of credit cards today. Another way to boost your credit is to pay down your utilization. So if you are at 50, 60, 70% utilization, pay down your credit. Not your student loans, but your credit cards, your revolving credit, like the personal loans that you have, or your car note, or, I'm trying to think of something else. That's typically the only loans that you would have that would help boost your credit. Another way to boost your credit is to fight and dispute anything that's on your credit, from a late payment to an inquiry to anything. And so there is a law and there's a statute. And in the book, there's actually, I have a sample letter that has the language that you need. And there's some legal jargon in here. It's a sample letter of how you can tell the 3 credit bureaus that you want something removed off your credit. And that sample letter is in the book, and there's full access to me if you need help with removing things off your credit. I was trying to think of, how do you fight it? So because you guys don't have access to the book, you write a letter to all 3 credit bureaus and you say, I never had an account with this person. Like, deny, shaggy, it wasn't me. Okay. Even if it was, it wasn't, because they have to prove it. And because they have to prove it, they have legally 30 days to take a look at the account and to find where did you sign and give this person permission to pull your credit. And if they can't show that they had permission to pull your credit, it has to be removed off your credit immediately. If they can't show where you have a relationship with them, like a documented relationship, it has to be thrown out the window. For example, I purchased a Dell computer. It was it was horrible. I said, I'm not paying for this. Please take it back. They said, we're not taking it back. You have to pay for it. Well, it's not working. Well, we're not going to fix it. So I was going back and forth fighting with them. And because Dell has Dell Financial, you can lease the computer through them. They are meticulous with their documents. That stayed on my credit for 7 years because I refused to pay them out of principle. And they refused to take it off my credit because they still had the documentations, even though I sent multiple letters like, take this off my credit, remove this off my credit. They were like, nah, Tayla, we got this document that you signed right here. It's valid. They proved I had that relationship. It stayed on. But there was something on my credit regarding like a rental car situation. And I was just like, this doesn't need, first and foremost, I paid in full. This shouldn't be on my credit at all. And it was sold to a creditor. And so, for instance, if Dr. Pilgrim and I have a relationship, I owe Dr. Pilgrim $100. She's like, Tayla, pay me my 100. Where's my 100? Tayla, give me my money. I'm like, I'm not paying you. I ain't got it. You'll get it when I get it. You know how we do it. You'll get it when I get it. I ain't got it, but when I got it, you'll get it. And they never get it. We never give it to them. So from there, she's like, you know what? I'm so sick and tired of this. Monica, here, Tayla owes me $100. If she pays you, then great. But pay me. She owes me 100. Pay me 25. If you get the money out of her, I don't care. But Monica and I don't have a relationship. So every time Monica calls me, I'm like, for what? We don't have a relationship, Monica. I don't know you. I never made relationship. You know what? Let me write this letter. Take Monica off my credit because we don't have a relationship. Bam. Monica, you have to prove that we have a relationship, which we don't. So it immediately has to come off my credit. Never, ever, ever pay a creditor. So if you're getting a call, this is something recovery services, do not pay them because they paid whatever company, Old Navy, Belk, whomever, they paid this person for a list. And these are all of the people that owe them money. And you were one of those people who owes them money. And so that's why they got to keep on calling because they paid for this list. They want their money back. And they're like, listen, we'll settle with you. You owe Dr. Pilgrim $100. But Monica's telling me, but Tayla, if you pay me $29, mind you, they paid $25 for it. They're trying to make $4 off of what they paid, or, you know, maybe $50, whatever. They're trying to get a little bit of money. And if they get a little bit of money, then it was worth it, right? But we don't have relationship. And so the way that it works is unless you can prove relationship, it has to be removed off your credit. If it don't fit, you must acquit type situation. And so if there's anything on your credit that you do not that you want to dispute, I say dispute everything. Let them do their due diligence. And if it stays on your credit, then it stays off. But if it falls off, amen.
So you got a few more questions. Someone said, where can they find the book? I put your link back in the chat. Someone wants to know, Jennifer wants to know, what's the best credit card for young people? Mm-hmm. And can you only write those letters if the payment goes to collections? Okay. So I do want to go back up because Monica asked the question about credit check on renting apartments normal. That is 100% normal. Right now in Massachusetts, they are considering having credit be removed off of one of the reasons that you can discriminate against someone. So for instance,
like, I'm going to be 100% transparent. There are landlords out here that are like, I don't want a Section 8 tenant, which is crazy because Section 8 is the only one who's actually paying rent right now. But one of the things that landlords would do is like, I just want somebody that has a 700 credit score, because if you have Section 8, you're least likely to have a 700 credit score. And so that is a form of discrimination by not saying, oh, I don't want Section 8, but by saying, I want somebody with a 700 credit score. And so Massachusetts is looking at passing a bill that will illegitimize your credit as being a component of why someone won't rent to you. If you have the funds, you should be rented to. But is it normal for people to check your credit before renting to you? Absolutely. Because if you're not paying Old Navy, you ain't finna pay me, the landlord. And so, yes, that is normal. The other question, what's the best credit card for young people? I would suggest Capital One. They do not pay me. Let me be clear. They are not good. I do not get paid from Capital One, but through my experience, it was helpful for me as a young person while getting all of these like credit. As soon as you turn 18, my son's 17 right now. He's getting credit card offers now that are going straight in the trash because he doesn't need them ever. But once you turn 18, I would say get you a Capital One. Most likely as a young person without any credit, you're going to get probably maybe $100 credit limit, maybe $150 credit limit. Use it to buy your food. Use it to, we're talking to college students. Can we have a real conversation? Use it when you go to the liquor store. Use it when you buy your raws or whatever you rolling with. Use it all the time and pay it off immediately, like literally that day. So you go ahead and you charge $20 for Uber Eats, go ahead and pay it off immediately. So that way you can build your credit in 3 months, revisit Capital One and ask them for an increase to your credit. And since what you're doing is you're demonstrating that you know how to use money. You can buy $75 worth of products and pay it off within the same day. It shows that you're trustworthy, that you know what you're doing, and that you're not going to be irresponsible. And so they're more likely to give you a credit increase. From that credit increase, you just continuously build that over and over again and do that over and over again. Sometimes if you are denied, you might have to get a secure credit card. What is a secure credit card? It's when you say, listen, I understand I don't have any credit. I am willing to give you this $200. Can you hold this $200 and put it on a credit card for me? So it's you using your own money to prove that you're good with money, and that not just young people, but there's elders that have messed up, jacked up credit from back in the 80s when people were putting putting credit in their kids' name. And these once upon a time kids are now adults and have messed up credit and owe the light company and owe the gas company and owe the cable companies, but never had these and do not want to put their parents in a position of being crooks or, having to deal with jail time. And so that's where you go ahead and you just get a secure credit card, whether it's for $100, $200, $500, and you continuously use that and then build your way into a credit worthy position where you can go ahead and get you, again, a Capital One. They do not pay me, but through experience, I was able to build an amazing credit with them. And they're actually my longest standing credit card as well.
So we have 2 minutes, unfortunately, actually 1 minute now. It goes by so quick, but everyone is enjoying your company. So we can stay on for a couple more minutes, but anyone who has to go, we can prepare to wind down. Tayla, why don't you give some last words, and let's also give Tayla some love, either applause or any other feedback.
Thank you. So Christopher, I want to say congratulations because he got a Discover card for students and got a credit limit of $5,000. That is huge. I want to say congratulations to you because you are absolutely doing something right for $5,000. And he said that the Discover card for students also has a great rewards program. So thank you for sharing that. I absolutely will share that with the young people that I come across in the future as well. It took me 3 years for a 777 credit score. I like that number. I'd keep a 777.
Right. That's awesome.
Um,
Say any last words, Tayla, for this class?
I'd like to thank you for being a part of the show today. You guys are have been awesome. If you guys have any questions, feel free to give me a call. My real number to my cell phone is 617-459-0041, 617-459-0041. If you go to my website, TAYLAANDRE.com, there's a portion on there where you can get the step-by-step guide for the credit. And that's, I believe, 1111. And it's a PDF, so you can get it automatically and not have to wait for it to be shipped to you. If you want the entire book, it is on Amazon. They don't pay me for real. That's why I sell it on my website. But it was a pleasure to be a part of the class. And if you guys have any questions, feel free to reach out anytime.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
So, everyone, thank you for your attention and thank you for welcoming Taylor. Sis, I know you're going to be with my next class too, so we'll just hang out for a moment.
Okay.
And everyone have a great day. Take care, be safe.
Finally Home is a must-read step-by-step guide that will equip any first-time homebuyer with the knowledge they need to confidently make informed decisions. This book provides answers in simple and clear terms to most, if not all, of the questions you may have about credit, homeownership, and generational wealth. Finally Home equips the reader with the confidence to be engaged with the home buying process without feeling vulnerable or exploited. Tayla Made Real Estate Easy is not just a catchy hashtag. It is real estate agent and radio personality Tayla Andre's goal. What's that thing called? Bankruptcies. We're able to remove bankruptcies from their credit. And so it's
bankruptcies like kind of fall off your credit after a while, or you would say fight it like immediately?
I'd say fight it immediately. Everything falls off your credit eventually. Everything falls off your credit after 7 years. And so some bankruptcies take 10 years. But for the most part, it's 7 years that it stays on your credit and it affects everyone. Like there's no one in the United States it does not affect.
I have another question. I don't know what I think in the timeline that you shared with us, at some point you talked about the disability rights.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm disabled and there's like things I'm not allowed to have and I can't get married, otherwise I'll lose my benefits and things like that. And I was wondering if that like factors into like just like a history of discriminatory practices against people that aren't like white or able-bodied and this and that.
So I can't speak on that because I don't know much about that. I'm definitely interested in learning and actually interested in like maybe contacting a disability attorney and seeing having a show on on that to learn a little bit more. And so once I'm able to find someone to have that conversation with me, I would love to share that with you.
Okay, yeah, thank you. I took your phone number, so I'd love to, because my partner, we've been together for 3 years, but he just bought a house here in Rosendale. But I'm not able to be on the deed because of my status, and if I, like, there's just a whole lot of stuff that I could lose, like my life-changing healthcare if I were to be on. And I wonder if there's some loopholes that you could, like,
Wow.
inform me more about.
Bring the Attorney General into this, Aurora.
Yeah, that's I'm completely unaware. I'm trying to look to see if any of the listeners that are listening right now have any information. Do you guys understand any, as far as like disability law? Does anybody have anyone in disability law that you guys can connect me with to get a better understanding of how you being disabled, you can't be. So hold on. Okay. So if you get a disability check, it may affect your disability check because I do know if you make too much money, you forfeit your disability check. And if you are on a mortgage or if you have a deed to a house, you're a homeowner and you have all of this equity, especially in Rosendale, girl, like that's $1 million house right there. And so if you have $1 million worth of quote unquote equity, even though it's not per se yours, then no, you don't need this disability. What you need $1,000 from the government for when you own $1 million house?
Yeah, I mean, that's what the whole, to me that seems like problematic because that's like forced poverty because I need the Medicare because I can't afford my health like on my own because I'm still a student even though my partner's not, and I can't afford my own health care. And so I just don't, it just seems, what am I supposed to do then, like, where am I supposed to live if I can't live in a space and share my funds with my family, right? If I have to be on my own. And first of all, the too much money that they're talking about is $2,000. I can't have $2,000 to my name or I lose benefits.
And that's
who lives on $2,000 in the city?
No, who lives on $2,000 anywhere? Not even in the city, anywhere. And that's per month, right? Like you can't make more than $2,000 per month. Yeah, that's crazy. So what I would suggest, honestly, if I'm being honest, it's not gonna be easy. It's not gonna be simple, but I would love to see you and a host of others that are abled but labeled disabled to stand up for your rights and put a bill on. So we as citizens can, in partnership with our elected officials, create bills. And so maybe finding out whoever I believe it's Ayana, whoever your congressman or woman is, and contact them and see if there's something that can be changed on a federal level regarding disabilities, because I can imagine that everyone across the nation is going through the same thing. When you're labeled disabled and you get a disability check, what would that look like for the millions, multi-millions that are disabled that want fair and equitable practices towards their home ownership, towards employment status?
That's right. So, Aurora, I'm so glad you stayed on and you brought this up because it's so eye-opening, and hopefully we can continue this conversation. Unfortunately, we have to go to my next class.
Yes.
But as you said, you have Tayla's number, and if anything happens, you could always go through me. But we'll see you soon.
All right. Thank you. Bye.
Thank you. Take care. Tayla, I'm going to end this and go on the other link.
Okay, and I'll come to the other link as well.
Thank you.
All right. Good rising, good afternoon, good evening, or good night. I am Tayla Andre. Waking up with Tayla Andre has absolutely nothing to do with the time of day we link up, but about waking up your third eye with unorthodox conversations leading to universal consciousness. Today is the day that the Lord hath made, and I am engaging in my first ever teaching a class. And so I am currently working on a program for Finally Home, the step-by-step guide for people preparing for first-time home ownership as a program. So I'm working on this program to teach to students in high school and college. And I'm hoping middle school, but I think it might be a little bit over the heads of middle school students, not all of them, but some of them. And so today I was given an opportunity by Dr. Amina Pilgrim of UMass Boston to present to both of her classes. And so we just wrapped up the first class where I presented the Finally Home step-by-step guide for people preparing for first-time home ownership. We went through the history of discrimination towards Blacks in home ownership in the United States on a federal level. And then we are about to begin for the 12 o'clock class, and it's going to be very similar to the first class, aside from whatever questions they may have. So the first class was called Women in U.S. Social Movements, and the second class is Women of Color. And so I am really excited because this is huge for me, right? The first class that I get to teach. And I feel like tonight I will be making some edits to the book based on today's show and what I think is really missing from here. And so if you guys have any questions, I would love to answer your questions as well. And I am going to read what is currently on here.
Music for today?
So hold on. So good rising, Mike. How you doing? Khadijah, what's going on? Khadijah said, this is vital education. Thank you, Tayla, for taking the time to make this recording and share it far and wide. She says she's infuriated by the information that I was sharing. Zion Lance, what's going on, love? What's going on, Andrea Jones? Sold. I'm getting a copy of the book today. Khadijah said reparations are much needed. The emotional and financial toll on Black people is massive. Mike said, okay, America with 2 Ks. Khadijah said 40% higher. That is unreal. Nick said that I teach this. I know you teach. I know what you do, Nicholas. I'm privy to the information. Khadijah said that she's not surprised. I've learned a lot, but much of these specifics are very new to me. Nicholas said they pay $100 million and then increase their fees to recoup their losses. Yes, Nick, you are right. Khadijah said personal finance in general needs to be taught. Financial institutions and the government don't want us to know how to create generational wealth. We have term life insurance to protect a financial plan until wealth is built. Rule of 72, how to avoid and pay down debt faster. How can we... I just want to be clear that I'm not being summoned to the class.
You are.
Oh, are we ready to be? I was reading some of the comments.
Well, you are watching you do your thing. So, welcome again and good afternoon, everyone. This is my dear sister friend Tayla Andre, who is an amazing woman, business owner. Like her website says, Radio Rebel. She's an author of an amazing book that we all should have. I wish I had it 20 years ago. But you're going to learn a lot from her today, and I'm going to turn it over to her. Tayla, feel free to start with music if you want, or just to jump in. And let's welcome her with applause or thumbs up or any feedback you can give in the Zoom.
Woo! I just did it all for you. And so I am Tayla Andre, and I feel bad because you guys I want to give you guys the same energy I gave the first class. So good rising, good afternoon, good evening, or good night. I am Tayla Andre. Waking up with Tayla Andre has absolutely nothing to do with the time of day that we link up, but about waking up your third eye with unorthodox conversations leading to universal consciousness. I am a radio personality and have been for almost 10 years now. I'm located here in the city of Boston. Spark FM Online is where I record from Monday through Friday, 11 a.m. to 1 p.m. And just being a radio personality, we've had the opportunity to interview everyone. I've interviewed the mayor, I've interviewed the governor, the police commissioner, both of them, Gross, who is current, and Mousy, oh gosh, I can't think of his name, when he was then the commissioner. Every city councilor that you can imagine, state rep, I interviewed everyone trying to find answers to why there were people walking their dog at 5 a.m. when once upon a time I could not go outside at 2 p.m. because of fear of violence that was happening in the city. And now all of a sudden people can take runs and jogs, and like, what is gentrification? How is it happening? And what is going on? And nobody could give me the answer, from, workforce development to economic departments of the city to the mayor himself. Like, nobody could give me a definitive answer on why the hell prices are increasing on properties that nobody once upon a time even could be paid to live in. And so, because I wasn't given the answers that I felt were the truth, I went ahead and fell down the rabbit hole of real estate to understand cycles and to understand, the backstory of what was going on. And that led me to obtaining my real estate license. And then from there, I've been a sponge trying to learn anything and everything about real estate and cycles, and like generationally how Black people are not homeowners. And that led me to a wealth of knowledge and history that we are not taught in high school. We are not taught in college. And unless we go seeking the knowledge, we are not in the know. And so Finally Home, the step-by-step guide for people preparing for first-time homeownership, was a book that I wrote during quarantine. It was supposed to come out years ago. I was supposed to do this a long time ago, but quarantine gave me the perfect opportunity to get it done. And so what I would like to read to you is the history of discrimination in the United States. But I would like to start with acknowledgments from this book. I want to give a huge shout out to George Bush and all other political and influential affluent assholes that implemented and currently support, in the form of complacent silence, a federal policy that encourages municipal education systems to leave children behind. With outdated teaching methods, deceitful curriculums, useless testing, over-disciplining, ignoring talent, and most importantly, failing to prepare our youth for the real world. This book exists because real education does not take place in our institutions. This book is dedicated to the 55-year-old that is just learning how to manage their credit, to the millennial that is breaking generational habits, and to the first-time homeowner that still doesn't understand the process of how to purchase a home. The history of discriminatory truth. History seldom speaks of victim struggles, resilience, or triumphs, but boasts about its accomplishments even when the victory was the sum of another's efforts. The colonizer that would proudly wear his or her red MAGA hat often uses the phrase, "pull yourself up by your bootstraps," while really ever knowing the truth behind how people of color couldn't even buy the boots or the straps to pull up. There are thousands of books on housing discrimination, the laws that created systematic oppressive practices, and still in 2020, urban communities are suffering from lack of proper education, misguided information, and blatant lies. This is the interpretation of housing discrimination timeline. In 1789, private property rights. The United States government ruled that Blacks are slaves and they are property, not citizens, and have no rights. In 1855, Massachusetts passed its Married Women's Property Act on May 5th, allowing married white women to have the ability to buy, sell, and manage real and personal property. In 1857, Dred Scott, who was then a fugitive slave, was suing for his freedom. But because Scott was property, he was not a citizen and had no rights. In 1865, Congress chartered the Freeman Saving and Trust Company, a banking institution for those released from slavery. No banking services were afforded to Blacks, even though they were land and business owners. In 1866, the 14th Amendment declared all persons born in the United States are considered citizens and have the same rights to real property as white citizens. In 1876, dyslexia is real, the government can take your land, and this is known as eminent domain. The government's duty to the public is more critical than an individual's inconvenience. Not 1872, the Homestead Act amended to include Blacks. 1877, Reconstruction ends, but Jim Crow begins. 1916, Buchanan versus Warley. The court found it unconstitutional for Louisville, Kentucky ordinance that prohibited Blacks from purchasing property in white majority-owned neighborhoods. In 1917, the Supreme Court ruled zoning based on race was unconstitutional. Owners began adding covenants or restrictions to their deeds. So even though the Supreme Court said we can no longer zone this area, that area for whites only or Blacks only, what they did in replacement was adding to the covenant of the deed or to the deed that made it restrictive. Under this language, no part of said lot shall be occupied by any persons of Negroid race or blood, except in the capacity of a servant. Property should never be sold, rented, or otherwise disposed of to any person or persons having any percentage of Negroid blood. In 1924, the National Association of Real Estate prohibits integration. So for those who know anything about real estate agents, if you see a real estate agent with an R in a circle next to their name, they are a realtor. Realtors that is the National Association of Real Estate Agents, and they prohibited integration. In their bylaws, it read, a realtor should never be instrumental in introducing into a neighborhood a character of property or occupancy, members of any race or nationality, or any individual whose presence will be detrimental to the property values in that neighborhood. In 1933, the Homeowners Loan Corporation, created by President Franklin D. Roosevelt, was part of the New Deal. In 1934, the Federal Housing Administration was established. In 1934, the U.S. government created redlining. The U.S. government, the United States of America, created redlining. It promoted racial segregation through the National Housing Act of 1934, allowing Homeowners Loan Corporation to create residential security maps to outline high-risk areas that were occupied by Blacks. This is predominantly the reason why, if you look at a map today of any city, where you will find like Black people, white people, and a small mix of everybody, because of these racial covenants existing in the United States government engaging in these practices firsthand. In 1936, the FHA promoted racial segregation, prohibiting the occupation of properties except by the race for which it was intended. Inharmonious racial groups and incompatible racial elements would devalue a neighborhood. The FHA is a quasi-governmental organization today that once upon a time engaged in racial practices. The GI Bill of 1944, or the Servicemen's Readjustment Act, afforded 63,000 white veteran homeownership opportunities, while only less than 100 of Blacks were able to utilize the Servicemen's Readjustment Act, or the GI Bill. And I recently learned from reading The Color of Law that the reason why these Black people, less than 100 out of 63,000 whites that were able to use a GI Bill. These less than 100 Black people that utilized the GI Bill used it under false pretenses. They either had a white man buying the house for them, they either had a white friend that could, nudge, nepotism is real, or they went ahead and just lied and said, nah, I'm white, and got the loan, and then later had their home taken away from them because they purchased under the false pretense that they were white. In 1947, block busting and real estate agents deceived whites into white flight. Blacks are moving in, it's time to move. And so there were Black people that were paid to have fights in the streets and to scare white women from moving. Oh my God, honey, today there were 2 Negroids that were fighting in the street. They would pay Black women to push a baby carriage in the neighborhood. They would also pay Black people to stage break-ins so that white people would move out of the neighborhood and then sell those homes astronomically higher to Black people. And it was typically anywhere between 5 and 20% that Black people were paying more than what a white person would pay for the same property. In 1948, the Supreme Court ruled against racially restrictive covenants, deeds that prohibited Blacks from purchasing properties. But that was 1948 when they stopped the ability for people to do these things. But it didn't rescind the previous covenants that have been going on for the last 50 years. In 1967, the Kerner Commission, our nation is moving towards 2 societies, one Black, one white, separate and unequal. In 1968, Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. was assassinated. In 1968, that's when President Lyndon Johnson signed the Civil Rights Act of 1968, which made amendments to the 1964 Act to include housing, also known as the Fair Housing Act, that prohibits the discrimination concerning the sale, rental, and financing of housing based on race, religion, national origin. It was later amended to include disabilities and family status. In 1968, Jones versus Meyer, the Supreme Court decision bars all racial discrimination, private as well as public, regarding the sale of property, rent, and the statute thus constructed is true exercise of Congress' power to enforce the 13th Amendment. In 1973, Donald Trump and his daddy were sued for racial discrimination. In 1974, the Fair Housing Act was amended to include sex. In 1974, the Equal Credit Opportunity Act, creditors cannot discriminate because of the race regarding of the loan, the race of the person obtaining a loan. In 1977, the Community Reinvestment Act, or the Housing and Community Development Act of 1977, requiring transparency of loan practices. And the reason why this was important is because when we go back to the racial covenants and the white flight kicking people out in order to bring Black people in and then charging them 5 to 20% more, Black people never knew that they were being charged 5 to 20% more because the loan originated, like it wasn't transparent at all. So it was just like, here, sign this document, instead of like, here, this is all of the things that you are actually agreeing to before you sign this document. In 1980, Bill Dedman investigated that banks would lend to lower income poor whites could get a house before an affluent Black family could purchase. In 1988, the National Fair Housing Alliance was founded. In 1988, the Fair Housing Act included family status and disabilities. In 2020, JP Morgan, Chase, Bank of America, Wells Fargo, Wachovia have all within the last 10 years were instructed to pay hundreds of millions of dollars towards discrimination cases, although this timeline began when Blacks and Indigenous were considered property. The discrimination towards melanated people still persists today. And as we know, there are still deeds that have covenants on them. And even though white people in Brookline are not selling a house to a Black person, regardless of how much they pay for it, there are some deeds that still have racial covenants in them. And it's going to cost a lot of money for them to be removed. I want to know whether or not the students that just took in this information, did you know about that? Were you taught that in high school? Were you taught that in college? Did you have this knowledge prior to today?
A lot of shaking heads, no. Use the chat as well, y'all, if you want to ask questions or make comments. We'll be looking at the chat. And thank you in advance. I also included Tayla's website and a couple of other pieces of information and resources there for you. Hey, son. Nice to see you.
You can say hi.
Bye.
So Kara said this is all new to me. Alexis said, I've heard of the GI Bill and redlining incidents. Taisha said, all new. Wow. Erica said, I've only recently heard about redlining, but not too much. Stephanie said, housing in general is a whole new topic for me. Jessica, how do I say her name properly? I don't want to butcher names, baby.
Is that right, Jacia?
It's Jacia.
Jacia said, I heard of redlining a little bit in high school, but not too much. And Meredith said that she has heard of redlining. So these are just discriminatory practices that have been going on for years. To this day, we still see discriminatory practices when it comes to people of color, when it comes to lower income people, people with Section 8 are being discriminated against. It's just, it's not new. This is not new to us, but yet many Black people are still going through this and not understanding why. And it's because we don't understand our history. The book also, go ahead.
Were you going to share the same case you shared in the other class about the couple?
Oh, yes. Yes, absolutely. So there was, this is in 2020. This just happened. It's still in the news. A couple out of Florida went ahead and wanted to appraise their home. So to appraise your home is to say, how much is my house worth? So they got an appraisal, and the woman, who is a Black woman, married to a white man, met the appraiser at the door. They had all these beautiful family pictures. They had Martin Luther King Jr. They had Malcolm X. They had like all of this like Afrocentric throughout their house. She's Black, he's white. He, accepted her family, merged into the family. And the appraisal came back at $268,000 when the rest of the neighborhood was coming back being appraised at $350,000. And so she went ahead and she said, you know what? I forgot that I'm still in America and I am a Black woman. She went ahead and took out all remnants of her Blackness and her son's Blackness out of the home. Her husband, who was white, was at the home, and it was only him, his guitar, his family, pictures of their ancestors. And the appraisal came back 40% higher at $368,000, $100,000 increase by simply removing her Blackness out of the home. And so while we can pretend like we live in a racially accepted society, these are bias that we see everywhere. Even in the mortgage industry, there's still bias in the mortgage industry where a white couple will be pre-approved for more than a Black couple will be pre-approved for. And it sounds crazy because it's illegal, right? We just read about all of these acts that were enacted that's supposed to make these practices illegal. But when you have biased persons sitting in positions of power, they have the authority to conduct business how they see fit, regardless of, the laws that are currently in place. And if you don't know your rights, people can trample all over them. And if it wasn't for the wife saying, I want another appraisal, they would have just sat there and accepted the $268,000 versus actually obtaining the additional $100,000 that they deserve.
That's right. And Alexis, your question. You know, they get away with it because of who's in control, who's in power, and because of what the rest of us don't know. So I put a note, Taylor, that this information that you're sharing can change everybody's life, perhaps, probably even more than your degree.
Yeah.
Because you need that stability, you need wealth to do almost everything, and you definitely need your credit.
And so there is a wealth of information that I can talk about as far as credit is concerned. But instead of wasting the time going through the list of things that we could talk about, I want to know, what questions do you all have about credit, or how to improve credit, or anything regarding credit that you may want to know. One of the questions that came up while you guys are writing in the chat, or you guys, if you want to be vocal, you can speak. We are live right now, so if you're
Sorry, yeah, Erica has her hand up.
Well, I wanted to like put a comment in. I don't know if anyone in the class has seen like this like TikTok trend with this guy who approaches people with really nice cars, and he always asks them what do they do for a living. And one of the videos, he approached like a few white people, and they said, oh, like, I'm an investor, or I'm this, like, just one word answers. And then he approached a Black woman, and he asked, what does she do for a living? And she had to like list like 4 different things, her degrees and everything that she does. And it's just like, within that 10-second video, you can see how different it is when it comes to wealth, or how much harder people of color, just specifically the Black community, has to work 10 times harder to be at the same level of the standard, which is, you know what I mean? Yeah.
Well, first I want to talk about your eyebrows, because them things are on fleek, baby. I love your eyebrows. You're absolutely right. The thing about it is, with real estate, you don't need a degree to own a home, to rent it out, and to create wealth for yourself. 80% of millionaires today created their wealth through real estate. And so everybody who is listening right now can purchase a multifamily anywhere in Massachusetts that your income will allow you to, and rent it out. And even so is it going to be harder for us Black people who make 50% of Bostonians make $30,000 or less? Is it going to be a little harder for you to create and amass that wealth? It's going to take longer, but it's not impossible. Let's say, for instance, I have a client that purchased a house 3 years ago in Taunton, a 3-family for $330,000. No, it was on the market for $350,000. We negotiated and brought it down to $330,000. Yes. So purchased a 3-family in Taunton for $330,000. He was handy with his hands. His wife had a really good eye and was a decorator. They went ahead and did all 3 floors all over again. He redid the basement so that it was just livable. It wasn't spectacular. It wasn't beautiful. It was actually a piece of crap, honestly, that nobody wanted to live in. But those other 3 floors were generating income for him. After a year, he went ahead and purchased another house, another multifamily, ended up moving into the second multifamily, which is only a 2-family, and was renting out the other floor, and now has 4 properties, 4 rental units generating income to the tune of $6,000 per month. And his mortgage is, what is his mortgage, like $3,900 between the 2 properties, and he pockets $2,000 a month. If he continues on this trend, he could be a millionaire in the next 5 to 7 years. Already, technically on paper, he's already a millionaire, because the properties have appraised over $1 million between the 2 of them. But as far as like liquid cash is concerned, he could be a millionaire in the next 5 years if he keeps doing what he's doing. So will it take longer for lower income people? Yes, it's going to take longer, but it's not impossible for you to amass the same amount of wealth as a white man who started in real estate and his daddy gave him $1 million to do so.
Stephanie has her hand up.
so I just had a question about like credit in general because like obviously I'm not like the most knowledgeable about it, but I was just wondering like how how banks develop your credit limit, because for me, I feel like because I'm still connected to like my mom and stuff like that, I feel like that helped me a lot in terms of having like a bigger credit limit. But I know people who are just starting off by themselves have like a much less credit limit than me. And I was just wondering like how they develop those numbers, because from my understanding, like even from like hearing from people from who come from less affluent or less privileged backgrounds than me, their credit limits are like, our differences are significant. And it's like sad to see that, because credit allows you to be able to
Do everything.
afford really important things. So it's just like, I don't know how they develop those numbers.
So how is your credit score generated is what I hear. Is that what you're asking? So your mom is a genius by throwing you on her credit card. And for anyone who is currently listening, if you have children, like Anari's on my credit card now. I didn't tell him because he's not about to get a credit card. He's not about to get access to the card. But Anari is currently on my card. And once he turns 18, his credit score is going to be up there, well off into the 700s. And that's because if your parents have a decent credit score, even like a 650, which is like subpar, it's fair. Even a fair credit score would be better than coming out at 18 years old and having no credit score. And that's typically what happens. You're 18 years old and you have all of these credit card offers being thrown at you, and you don't have any credit. And so you're typically looking at anywhere between like $75 to a $500 credit limit when you don't have any credit. But for Stephanie, who was put on her mother's credit and was able to generate a score, she might be able to get like a $2,000 to $5,000 credit limit because she has credit established. And so how do you establish credit? There's two ways. Your parents can put you on your credit, or even like lines of credit. I personally have charged people to throw them on my credit. I throw them on my credit and all of a sudden their 500 shoots up to a 680. So that's one way. It's called trade lines, purchasing a trade line. And another way is the slow and steady wins the race way. And that's by getting a secure credit card or starting off with something like a Capital One credit card. We I learned earlier in the previous class that Discover has an amazing student credit card where one of the students had a $5,000 credit limit because he was working hard to get his credit score, to improve his credit score. So if you do not have credit and you want to start today building credit, the first thing that I would tell you to do is go to Capital One and to apply for a credit card. How you apply, your first name, last name, address, how much money do you make? Are you a student? Are you this? Are you that? And then your social security number, they'll come back and say either we're going to send you a letter telling you that you're not going to get a credit card, or you are approved for X amount of dollars. They may even suggest that you open a secure card, which is when you say, here, I'm going to give you this $200, this $100, this $500 to hold for me and put it on a credit card. And you use that credit card. Use it to buy your alcohol, or use it to buy your weed products. Use it to buy whatever it is that you want to buy. Use your credit card and pay it off immediately after. You buy something on Uber Eats for $25. At the end of the day, go ahead and pay that credit card for the $25 that you just charged. Why? Because it shows that you are responsible with your money and you know how to pay. Make sure you pay on time. timely payments are the number one reason why people have low credit scores. Credit utilization. So Capital One gives you $100 credit card and you're using $95 of it. You're using 95% of your credit utilization. Pay that down to $30. So you're at 30% credit utilization. It would be best if you had $0, so you could just pay it off and you're not paying high interest rates. But once you continuously use it, pay it, 3 to 6 months later, go ahead and say, hey, can I have a credit increase? And continue to do that until you are happy with wherever your credit is, wherever your limit or your credit is suffice to you. Another way you can build credit is if you go and get a store card. Most of the time, store cards will give you like a little $100, $250 limit. You can start there as well. It doesn't have to be a credit card.
Maybe you see Alexis has a question.
Like this is gonna sound dumb, but like I had no knowledge of like,
You're fine.
I had no knowledge of like credit in general. We never got that like financial like type stuff in school. I didn't know what it was. And I'm like hearing all this now, especially with the history of like systemic injustice towards people of color. I'm like, how do we get back to having like, I don't know, like Black entrepreneurship? How do we get back to like having small town America? How do we get back to like, what is it? Like having like Black business owners, Black homeowners. And I'm like, with all this happening now, like, what do we do? Like, how do we get there?
So we on the same page, baby, because I'm like, how do we separate and build in Tulsa, Oklahoma ourselves into success? And it seems like it's so far removed, like it's not possible. But there are a lot of, if you look, you know, it's something that you have to actually look and find. It's not that's widely promoted. No one wants to promote that Black people are doing well. Nobody wants to promote that Black people are building wealth and creating generational wealth. Killer Mike just recently partnered with, I can't think of their name, but Greenwood Bank. And Greenwood Bank is now a Black-owned institution. And if you want, you can go ahead. I can send a link to for the Greenwood banking link.
I'll do that for you. Greenwood is basically a digital Black, trying to become like a digital Black Wall Street, Alexis and everyone else. I'll put a link in the chat.
And so Greenwood Bank is a institution that you can partner with. And aside from Greenwood Bank, there are other Black people out here that like hashtag buy the block, hashtag by the neighborhood. There's a Black woman in South Carolina that purchased land and built a community of houses, like beautiful brick, 2, 3, 4 bedroom homes, and is owned by a Black woman. Like, there are communities out here that are being built and are doing group economics. Like the Kwanzaa principles are not for Christmas. Like they're Monday through Friday, like group economics, coming together, putting our money together. This isn't stuff that is taught in school, and no one ever wants to talk about, like, it's always about divide and conquer instead of, what if Alexis, Erica, Stephanie, Kara, what if all 3 of you or all 4 of you put your money together and say, listen, we're going to buy a multifamily. We're going to share the first floor. We live in the first floor, and we're going to go ahead and collect rent from the second and third floor. You could do that, and you let that, let the money compound. The city is getting, building up. You're getting equity. You can refinance. You can go ahead and either split the profits 4 ways, or you can do it again and do it again and do it again. So when you look at the Asian community, there's like 15 of them living in the house, but at the end of 5 years, 7 years, all 15 of them own a home.
Same thing with Cape Verdean.
Yep.
Haitian, many communities do this. Just in case you didn't see it, Ruthland, I think, or someone else had a great question about the Apple Card. Yes, Ruthland.
I have the Apple Card and I love it. It's very user friendly. And if you use Apple Pay, I got my credit up enough to qualify for it. That's amazing. I would say like the worst thing they can do is tell you no. And then one of the things that we discussed in the previous class that a lot of people don't know is there is no legal statute for people to put negative items on your credit. So if you go ahead and have an inquiry for the Apple Card, you have an inquiry for Macy's, you have an inquiry for Old Navy, you have an inquiry for the Capital One. And so you're over here, trying to get a card, everyone's denying you, but now you have 15 different inquiries on your account. You can fight those. I say, Shaggy, it wasn't me. You write out a letter and I can send Dr. Pilgrim a sample letter so you guys can use. It's also in the book, Finally Home, the step-by-step guide for people preparing for first-time homeownership. But you can send them this letter with your information on it and say, I never applied for an Apple Card. They have to prove that you did. They have to show that there was relationship between you. And if they can't prove that, it comes off your credit immediately.
Thank you. Nikki, go ahead with your question. We have 10 minutes left.
I just have a quick question. So I was the one that asked about the Apple Card because I have never had a credit card before, and my sister keeps telling me that would be the best option for me. I'm confused because if I've never had a credit card, would I be able to apply for an Apple Card?
Can you apply? You can always apply. The worst thing they can tell you is no. And so I wouldn't stop you from applying, especially it seems like Apple has been extremely flexible since everybody has an iPhone and they really want to create this new platform for themselves. So I would say, yes, apply for it. Just don't expect them to give you a $10,000 credit limit. Taisha said, I heard if you pay half your bill 15 days in advance, then another 3 days in advance, it will raise your score. Your thoughts? And so really, Taisha, what it is just paying. It's just an early payment. The reason why people pay like that is to mitigate interest on their cards. And so will it help raise your credit limit by doing that in 15 and 3 day increments? It's not the 15 and 3 that helps improve your credit. It's the fact that you paid off whatever it was that you had on your credit early, on time, so it wasn't late. And then what you're also doing is paying down your credit utilization. So again, you were given $100 credit card. You had $75 on it. You paid early, which made it on time for you. And you paid $100. You paid $30, which brought you down to $40. I hope I did that math right. And now you're at 40% utilization versus the 70% utilization that you were at. And so now your credit score is being adjusted based on the fact that you paid on time and the fact that you paid down your utilization. So it's not necessarily the 15 and 3, but it's the actions of that payment that helped increase your credit score because of the on-time payment and the lowering of the credit utilization. Trayvon said that Capital One starts you off at 300 limit for the first 3 months and then raises your credit to 500 if you make payments on time. Though that may be true for your experience, Capital One gave me a $75 credit limit and raised it to $150, and I was stuck at $150 for a year and a half. And so everybody is different. That was the only credit card that I had. And so I wish I started out at 300, but I started off at 75 and got stuck at 150 and then got stuck again at 300 and then got stuck again at 500. And so everybody's different. Everyone's credit history is different. Everyone's payment history is different. And it's really on you. And especially your utilization. That's important too. Erica said, does a phone bill increase credit score? I've heard of this, but I don't know if it's accurate. So there are programs now where you can request for T-Mobile to, show your on time. Listen, if T-Mobile, if T-Mobile reported whether or not I paid on time, my credit score would be a 400. I don't never pay T-Mobile on time. I don't know why. I don't like paying the phone bill on time. But can you? Yes, you can. You can also utilize your rent. You can also utilize your light bill and your gas bill, your utility bills. And the reason why this is such now, so this is like new programs that are rolling out to help people build credit because of the economy and what's going on in society. And so they're trying to find ways to mitigate the fact that people are not able to be this credit-worthy profile, but also giving them the benefit of the doubt for the bills that they are paying on time. Ruthlin said, is buying a trade line guaranteed to raise your credit score? I would not say guaranteed, because I have put somebody on my trade line and their credit score didn't jump much. The reason why is because, let's say, for instance, we're on a seesaw. I weigh 300 pounds. You weigh 100 pounds. If you put 50 pounds on your side, is that really going to weigh me down? No, I'm still 150 pounds heavier than you. And so if you have somebody whose credit is all the way jacked up and they buy a trade line, my 780 isn't going to do much for you if you owe 15 different creditors and you're in default with all 15 of them. It's not much my credit can do for you. So yes, buying a trade line can increase your credit score, but it really depends on what your credit history truly looks like. There is a way, again, going back to the sample letter, you guys can use, if you do owe multiple people, Shaggy, it wasn't me, dispute every single last one of them. Let them do their due diligence and come back and tell you who you actually owe, instead of you coming out of pocket and just paying everyone off. What we discussed with the previous class as well, that I think is extremely important for you to know, is if I owe Dr. Pilgrim $100 and she's like, Tayla, pay me. And I'm like, no, Tayla, pay me. No, I ain't got it. Tayla, give me my money. You get it when I got it. Right? She ain't never gonna get it for real. But she's like, I'm tired of this. I can't do this no more. Ruthlin, buy this off of me for $25 and try and get this $100 from Tayla. And Ruthlин's like, okay, I'll do that. Tayla, pay me this 100. Tayla, pay me this 100. Tayla, you know what? You don't have to pay me 100. Pay me $50 and we'll cut this out today. Like I'll take it off your credit, whatever you want to do. It's gone. And I'm like, oh, okay, I'll pay you $50 more. I don't have to pay the 100 that I owe Dr. Pilgrim. I'll pay you your 50, Ruthlin. Do not ever, 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 ever pay credit card companies collectors. I don't know why I couldn't get that word out of my mouth. Don't ever pay collectors. You've never had a relationship with them. Ruthlin, we ain't got no relationship. You don't have no document that said Tayla promised to pay me $100, $50. And that's why creditors will sit there like a $20,000 loan that you owe. They'll be like, just give me $150 today and we'll call it case closed. It's because they just want anything. They want any amount of money and add these pennies up to have something. But exactly. And you pay them. So by paying them, you're accepting obligation. Do not pay them. Write the letter, send it to all three credit bureaus. I never had a relationship with this person. I never had a credit card with this. I never applied for this. I never was even known by this name. And so Cynthia has a question, and I know we're coming to the top of the hour, and I want to get your question in.
Yeah, just let me say, Yes, Erica said, I wish this was longer. Hopefully we can convince Professor Tayla Andre to come back. But for those of you who can stay on for a few minutes, you can stay with us. For everyone else, if you have to go, it's okay. But go ahead. Last words, Tayla.
Oh, I really want Cynthia. What did you want to ask?
Can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Okay, so I just wanted to mention why you said the collectors. I just run into an issue with collectors as well. So basically, when I was living with my stepmom, she used my social. So guys, be careful who you let use your social. So I think something she went to collectors and that affected my credit. And I was like, because at first I never wanted to open a credit card, and my sister was like, you should do it because you're gonna need it in the future. You never know. And then that affected my credit. And then I was like, oh my God, what should I do? Because I was trying to get a loan, and then that kind of like stopped me from getting the loan because my credit was perfectly fine. But then because of that, and I didn't know what to do. I didn't know who to contact. And then somebody helped me, and then I reached out to her, and she called and have them take care of it, and then my credit went back to how it was before. But like the collectors are very you just need to be careful, because some people are lucky where like it goes to collector and then they never like do anything, and some people are not, where they don't take it off your credit and then it affects you really bad. So yeah, that's what I wanted to add to that.
And she's absolutely right. Some creditors will, if you do pay them after you pay, like you have to be specific and say, if I pay you, you're going to delete it off my credit. Not because what they typically do is you pay them and they say that this default is paid, but it's still a default on your credit. So you want to be clear and to tell them to take it off, like delete it off my credit. And you want that in writing, whether they email it to you or whether they mail it to you. Don't make any agreement unless they say specifically that they are going to delete it off your credit once payment is made. But that's only if you want to make payment. You don't have to. You can write the letter, send it to the creditors and say, I never had a relationship with them. And then they have to prove that you have a relationship with them. But if me and Ruthlyn ain't never had no relationship, Ruthlyn, how you going to prove that we have a relationship? You can't. Take it off my credit. One more thing, as far as the question about what is the best card for points. So for me, I have different cards for different things. So I'm going to be transparent here, right? So I have a JetBlue card. So when I take JetBlue flights, I get free luggage. I have a Delta card. So when I take Delta flights, I have free luggage. So different cards for me work for different reasons. And then my JetBlue gives me the most amount of points. So I'll use that for like everyday spending, grocery store, gas type situation. So it really depends on you and what's best for you. And so just look at when you have established credit and you're looking at benefits, just look at the benefits that are best for you. Any other questions? I just want to say that it is an absolute pleasure to have been a part of your class today. I thank you so much. If you have any questions, feel free to reach out. My direct line is 617-459-0041. Reach out on the website. The book is online. If you just want credit, you don't want the book, you're not looking to buy a house. This is not like you want to buy a house in the next 2 years, you get the book. No, for me, this book is if you plan on buying in the next 10 years, get the book so you can be prepared and so you can be properly informed. And so for me, it's so many agents out here that are making decisions on behalf of their client, and their client doesn't know A from Z. So they're just taking with a grain of salt all of whatever the agent is doing. And sometimes this isn't beneficial for our clients. And so it's necessary for me, for every single last one of my clients to be fully informed on the process, on what the steps are, the good, the bad, the ugly, so you can make informed decisions. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor. Everyone give her a hand and some love. Thank you all so much for sharing the time. And Tayla, we definitely have to have you back. Thank you for all that you're doing.
Thank you.
And we'll talk soon. Everyone enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I am Tayla Andre. Waking Up with Tayla Andre has absolutely nothing to do with the time of day we link up at about waking up your third eye with unorthodox conversations leading to universal consciousness. Home is a must-read, step-by-step guide that will equip any first-time homebuyer with the knowledge they need to confidently make informed decisions. This book provides answers in simple and clear terms to most, if not all, of the questions you may have about credit, homeownership, and generational wealth. Finally Home equips the reader with the confidence to be engaged with the home buying process without feeling vulnerable or exploited. Tayla Made Real Estate Easy is not just a catchy hashtag. It is real estate agent and radio personality Tayla Andre's goal. A goal to simplify one of the most challenging processes you will go through as an adult. A goal to educate you properly on credit and teach you the strategies to finding the home of your dream. It is not just a good book or an easy read. It is the secret to a seamless home buying experience. Left, y'all. My bad. I X'd out and left it. Zion Lance. Yes, if you want to put your 1-year-old on there, go on and put your 1-year-old on the trade line. My broker, Alex E. Edwards, his 3-year-old just bought a house. So I'm going to say yes to that as well. Can you ask for a credit increase, and how often should you ask? Baby, I ask every 3 to 6 months. Every 3 to 6 months. Hey, yo, you want to improve my credit? Listen, I'm trying to have my credit cards over $150,000 to have access to over $150,000 in credit. And so I'm working on it. I'm not there yet, baby. I'm not there yet, but slowly but surely wins the race. That's what I'm working on. I thank you. I love you. I appreciate you. I can't wait for tomorrow. We have a dope show tomorrow. We got a dope show every day, don't we? Make sure you share with your friends. Hit the share button, hit the like button, and we will